Okay, hi everyone. This is another recorded session for the QI curriculum for 2023-2024 Harbor UCLA. This session is going to be on planning change. Let's see here. So I'll give start by giving a quick overview of the QI curriculum again. This is our objectives. The main goal is to, again, complete a resident-led QI project, and then ideally disseminate your work. And so again, at the end of this year, the hope is that you'll have everything you need to put together an abstract for a regional meeting. You could also submit to Solomon Scholars, and then we are going to plan on having a grand rounds, a sort of a QI grand rounds. I'll coordinate with Dr. Lee to figure that out at a later time. So the framework we have been using is the IHI framework, the IHI model for improvement. This is what we've done so far is we talked about introduction to quality improvement, briefly introduced QI frameworks, talked a little bit about Lean A3 versus IHI model for improvement. Again, the sort of PDSA versus plan, do, check, act. And then on the left side here are some things from Lean. On the right here is model for improvement. I should have reversed that. Anyways. And then you should have an aim statement by now. And again, this might be something like reduce the percent of inpatient glucose measures from X% to Y% by a particular date, or reduce readmissions from whatever baseline to less than 10% on general medicine ward patients by a particular date. We want our aim statement to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and have some kind of time component. So we want to have a deadline. We've been talking about planning your change. So last time or 2 times ago, we talked about what is the current state and analyzing the problem. And then last time was planning change. This time we're going to briefly review the driver diagram and fishbone we went over last time. And then I'm going to introduce some additional tools. Just for your benefit and knowledge, these tools aren't prescriptive. Some of these tools are more or less helpful depending on the team you have, what you're trying to do. And so, I would suggest trying them out, but if you don't end up using it, that's totally fine. And so last time we talked about a fishbone diagram. This is the anatomy of the fishbone diagram. There's an effect, and then usually you have these categories that are the sort of ribs coming off of the spine of the fish, and then some causes and whys for each of those ribs. And so again, the reason it's called a fishbone is because it looks like a fish. This was an example around inadequate inpatient bowel prep. Here, the categories that were picked were communication, education, process or system factors, medications, patient factors, environment. And then under each of these, or one reason or some reasons that inadequate inpatient bowel prep might happen is a communication failure between the GI team and some of the other team members, maybe communication failures with the patient and family. Maybe there's some educational issues, lack of knowledge of what the prep instructions should be, what does NPO really mean. Maybe there's some process and system factors where there's variability in the scheduling, there's lack of a standard order set. Maybe there's a lack of responsibility, like a shared responsibility where it's not clear whose role is what. Maybe there's some medication issues such as inavailability of the bowel prep, or maybe there's multiple different types of bowel prep. Patient factors, such as lack of understanding. Maybe there's some language issues. Maybe there's some environment issues such as access to the commode, or maybe the rooms in the ED aren't set up for a patient to get bowel prep, or a lack of privacy. And then this is a driver diagram. So this was an example from a project I did on reducing daily lab orders. Here you might have some outcome measures such as reducing the labs per 100 patient days, some primary drivers, always ordering CBC with diff. Why does that happen? Maybe CBC no diff isn't available in the order set. Maybe there's an assumption that you always need a diff, lack of knowledge or understanding of when a diff is indicated versus not. When does it add in clinical information? And again, you can we went through this last time, so I'm not going to belabor it. And then we talked about this briefly, and I'm actually going to show a video. Let me load it up while I'm talking. And so I took this YouTube video from the IHI. So let me do this. Sorry for the technical issues. And then let me load it up. And then I am going to share this video in a second. So let me make it full screen and share it. Let me just. Okay, I paused the recording for a second because I didn't want you all to just have to wait through my troubleshooting of technology. So I'm going to show this brief video. So here we go.
There are a number of approaches for determining the cause. Common ones include fishbone diagrams or the 5 whys exercise. Any of you who have young children understand the 5 whys exercise. It's about asking why enough times to get to the root cause. Children do this very well with their inquisitive minds. Let me give you an example. Mrs. Smith is an elderly patient with moderate to severe congestive heart failure who is being admitted to the hospital approximately every 6 weeks. Why? Well, fluid was building up in her lungs and she was having worsening shortness of breath and could not sleep. Why? The sodium content was building up in her body, causing the fluid retention. Why? The patient was either ingesting too much sodium or the diuretics weren't working well enough. Why? The patient lacked the knowledge and support to manage her diet and drug regimen. Why? The patient education process was ineffective and the support systems don't exist when they go home. This is the final why that gets to the root cause of this particular problem.
So that was just a brief video going over the 5 whys. Let me pull up my slides again. And so again, I think that that is a helpful kind of exercise to help identify what might be the root cause of the thing that you're trying to impact. So it's kind of ways of identifying problems or changes that you might be able to do in the process. So so now we're going to go over some new tools, some things we haven't gone over yet. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is a Pareto chart. And so these next few tools are meant to help you prioritize what changes or what failures or what root causes you're going to go after with your changes. And these aren't the only tools that help with this, but these are the ones that kind of are a little bit more formalized and can help you, again, identify changes that can have a large impact. So what is a Pareto chart? So the Pareto chart is based on the Pareto principle, or also known as the 80-20 rule. And the idea here is that 80% of the effect, and here it might be 80% of the failure of a process or the possible impact on improvement. So 80% of that improvement comes from 20% of the causes. And so the idea is that if you focus on that 20%, you can actually have an outsized impact on the outcome or the process you're trying to improve. And if you apply that again, there's this idea that 64% of the effect comes from 4% of the causes. And so if you focus on that 4%, you can actually reduce errors or have improvement gains that are over half, or reduce over half of your errors, or improve by over 50%. And this isn't a hard and fast rule, but I think it's a principle that applies to most processes that and kind of applying this principle can help you identify changes that can have an outsized impact with less effort. And so here's an example. The way you do this is you identify each of your errors, and then you start to list the frequency these errors happen. In this example, it might be you might use something else, but so example, medication errors, or here it's about types of errors discovered during surgical setup. And so here the identified errors were wrong supplier, excess count, too few count, wrong size, wrong sterile instrument set, missing item, damaged item, or other, and then the frequency with which it happens. And so, out of all the errors, 144, 67 of them were wrong supplier, 24 were excess count. And then you get this percentage, and then you turn it into a cumulative percentage, and you order it from most common to least common. And so then you can take this data table and chart it out, and you can see that if you focused on something like missing item as something that you wanted to change and improve, you're actually not going to reduce your errors by that much. If you focus more on this wrong supplier in this particular system, then you're going to have a much higher outsized impact on reducing the errors during surgical setup. And this might be the same thing with like medication errors, for example. So maybe the most of your medication errors are due to insulin orders and versus other types of orders. And so then you want to focus on insulin orders rather than focusing on a lot of other orders that maybe even are easier to intervene on, but the impact you're going to have is less. And so, think about your process. Does this kind of tool help? And you'd want to start to gather some data and sort of bucket your failures or errors or whatever into different categories, and then chart it out like this. And this can be very, very helpful, and it's much more objective than sitting around ruminating on what changes you might want to do. Another tool is something called the failure modes and effects analysis. It's part of both the IHI and Lean A3 models, and it's really a systematic proactive analysis of a process in which harm may occur. It prompts reviewing and recording of the steps in the process, which hopefully you've already mapped out in your process flow map, and then record the failure modes, causes, and effects. And basically, what does that mean? So the failure mode is what could go wrong. The cause is why would it go wrong? And then the effect is what would be the consequence of each failure. And so how do you make this table? For each step in the process, you identify failures that can happen. You write down the mode, cause, and effect, the what, why, and effect of each failure. And then you assign each failure a likelihood of occurrence, a likelihood of detection, and a severity of the impact on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is a little bit more subjective. This is probably best if you have like an interdisciplinary team and you're just trying to write down and get on the same page as to what could go wrong and how often it happens, how likely are you to detect it, and then what is the size of the impact of each error. And using these numbers, which you're assigning to each failure, you calculate a risk profile number that is the product of these three numbers. And I'll show you what this looks like in a second with an example. And you can use this risk profile number to plan your improvement efforts. And so the higher risk profile numbers reflect the failures that are more likely to occur, more likely to be detected or known to occur, and have the greatest effect. And these are the ones that probably should be considered as priorities when you're considering changes and where to focus your improvement efforts. And so here's an example. So maybe you're talking about failures in medication dispensing processes. And so out of these three, one error, one step in the process might be orders are written for new medications. And the first dose may be given prior to pharmacist review of the orders. So that's the failure mode. So what could go wrong? The why might be that the medication ordered may be available and easily accessed in the dispensing machine. And so the patient may receive the incorrect medication, the incorrect dose, or a dose via incorrect route. So that's the effect of the failure. How likely is this to occur? Maybe it occurs like 6, on a scale of 6, so it occurs a lot, and the likelihood of detection is pretty good, 5, but maybe the severity of the impact isn't so high. It's only 1. And so then you multiply these together and you get a risk profile number of 3. And then for 30, I mean. And so for each of these, maybe you can identify an action to reduce the occurrence of the failure. So here, maybe you can assign clinical pharmacists to patient care units so that all medication orders can be reviewed as they occur. And then if we compare that to the next one, orders are written to discontinue a medication or change the existing order. So that's a step in the process. And the failure is that orders are written to discontinue a medication or change the existing order, but and the effect is that the patient may receive the medication that has been discontinued. And so, or the incorrect dose of a medication that has been changed. And so the idea here is that the order is written, but it's not noted or seen, the order to discontinue or change. And so maybe the cause is that all doses needed for a 24-hour period are all delivered at the same time to the drawer, and the drawer is not changed until the next routine delivery 24 hours after the first one. Maybe the 24-hour supply of refrigerated medications is delivered, or maybe multi-dose vials are kept at the beds in a patient-specific drawer. And so as medications are being dispensed, there's this automatic dispensing of medications that are available, even though there's been an order to discontinue or change the medication. So then the group thinks about how likely is this to occur. So this group assigned a likelihood of 10, so it occurs like pretty much every day. The likelihood of detection is 5. And then the severity, the impact is 5. So it's much higher than the severity of the first one. And so you do a risk profile number, and this is 250. And so this might be where this group decides to focus their efforts, is on this failure that occurs a lot and has a pretty high severity. And so you can see how even if a failure has a higher severity, if the occurrence is lower, the detection is low, it may have a lower risk profile number. And maybe that isn't where you want to start your improvement efforts. And so here they brainstormed and they came up with some ideas of how to prevent this from happening or reduce this failure from happening. And so their ideas were to schedule pickups of discontinued medications, including refrigerated medications twice a day, or use a dispensing machine screen to verify all information regarding the current and discontinued medications prior to each administration. And so again, these are system specific, but this is an idea to kind of brainstorm and write down and prioritize your efforts. Just very briefly about project planning form Lean A3. And so I gave you a project template. It's based off of the IHI project planning form, but the idea behind it is to write down your work. I think it helps to write it down so that you can all be sure you're talking about the same thing, but also helps keep track of your work, helps you know what you did when, especially when we start to getting to implementing changes. Keeping track of when your changes were implemented will help you identify if your changes led to improvement. And it also helps you spread the change. Having things written down will help you when you're sharing with others, share what worked, what didn't work. And it's also important for scholarship. Part of what makes one QI project worthy of an abstract or a manuscript is, do you have enough detail that the work you did could be replicated in another system if they decided to embark on the same process. And in order to do that, you really need to keep track of your work. And so, one way of keeping track of this would be the IHI project planning form. This is the project, what the project template, the PowerPoint I made is modeled after. There's a link here. If you go to ihi.org and look for Quality Improvement Essentials Toolkit, you can actually download the kit for free. Let me just show you the website. So you can actually download the toolkit for free. There's some fun videos to kind of give an overview of the QI toolkit that you can use. And then there's the Lean A3 form. This is Harbor UCLA's official QI methodology. Let me end this slideshow and pull, oh, here we go. So this is what it looks like. And this is, again, another way to kind of keep track of your work. It has a lot of the tools that we had gone over. So here you can see a process flow map, a fishbone down here, keeping track of your measures, things like that. And so, again, keeping track of your measures. And so whatever form you use, I think it is helpful to use a form to keep track of your work. Oh, it kind of hopped back a few slides. Sorry about that. And so that's it. I think the objectives for the live session are going to be filling out the QI template, coming up with ideas for changes. We could talk about implementing changes if you get to that point, but I expect that most groups are still in the process of ensuring you have a way of tracking your measures and your data, developing an aim statement, and then starting to brainstorm ideas of changes, maybe filling out a failure modes and effect analysis table, or making a Pareto chart. You may still be in the step of doing a driver diagram or a fishbone. That's perfectly fine. But we'll start the live session with sharing progress. I think this will be helpful. We haven't really done this, but I'll have each group have just a few minutes to share what's going well, what's not going well, what are some challenges you're facing, where have you been able to address your challenges, what are some tips you might have that you can share with other groups to help them progress in their QI. The next few sessions, so we'll be getting to implementing changes, and so we'll kind of do a sidebar and go over some special topics. I'll present briefly on health equity and patient-centeredness and quality improvement, and then also on addressing barriers to change. But the majority of the time in the next few sessions is going to be spent working in groups. It's going to be group time, less me talking and more you guys working. And so that is it. Thank you for the feedback on that these pre-recorded sessions are helpful. I will continue to make them. And yeah, see you guys at the live session.